Okay, folks, this is Coach Mike. Going to get started with the focus group video to go over our focus group spreadsheet. Going to start just at the top of the sheet with the first trade I have listed. The chart linked is the chart that you see here, the weekly chart. You actually see on the weekly chart we just closed barely below the prior week's uh, swing low or the prior swing low point from a couple weeks ago. Um, this could open up a 50-50 trade for the 417, 118 puts. I just want to tell you though, on the little bit of caution side, I've talked a lot since Apple started pulling back about how similarly it has replicated the prior earnings time frame. And even though that would have kind of had us getting like two green candles instead of this one, if you look at the total percentage move made there, it kind of makes up for that, the low to the upper end of this wick before falling again this past week. That actually could lead us to like a shorter term fall early in the week, but then a fairly strong week if it was going to replicate that. Even though I have that 417, 118 puts play, and it does qualify for an entry right at the open, I'm not going to necessarily decide if I'm taking that entry until I see like where the futures are at, um, and really kind of an overall feel of the S&P. Now, because it did close below there, I don't need to wait for a whole week to close, but I might wait until I feel a little more comfortable before entering that trade in particular. I'm going to come over here to the daily chart. The next one I actually have linked is kind of an ironic one. It's for the 417, 125 calls. Why? Well, again, if you look over here, that replication of the pattern in the last earnings, that kind of means that even though we could dip a little bit lower than this first close over here, it might not be much, and it could actually sucker us into a 50-50 trade. So I'm going to see how it forms up. If it seems to hold that double bottom area, it would not be something I would enter like early in the week. I would actually see if it failed this swing low point and then came up above it. And if it failed it and then came up above it, kind of like it did back here when the swing low point was right where my horizontal white line is, then we could look at those 417, 125 calls. Now, the other trade I have listed is obviously if it closes below that weekly swing low point or daily swing low point, we could get the 417, 118 puts as a 50-50 trade. Now, this one I would probably have an interest in taking, but if I take that, I will be very, very quick to grab those 125 calls on any up move on the daily chart. Just because you see down here, you would have had a line right here, and on this day, you would have entered at the close or at least at the open of the next day, and it shot down for a little bit of the day and then came back up and boom. Well, it is replicating the pattern fairly well, but at the same time, you don't want to give up the opportunity. So even though it's a 50-50 trade, I think if I entered it and it came back above the swing low point here, not only would I enter those 125 calls, but I'd probably exit my 50-50 trade. So that's a kind of a simple explanation there. Over now to the 60-minute chart. Granted, last week I probably had a really good opportunity to enter on this candle, and I didn't. That could have been a good 50-50 trade. But right now, I got this mark at 122.25, this lower red line. I don't want to do a 50-50 off the 60-minute chart unless it fails below that. And I don't want to do a 50-50 unless it goes above this green line. So I got a range 122.25 to 124.44. I'm going to let Apple bebop in there, mainly because it is a holiday week coming up, and I don't want to get stuck by slow and sideways. Going to move over to Goldman Sachs now. We did have a swing high point here that it came above a couple weeks ago. It came down and actually still managed to hold above and close above this swing low point, 186.91. If it were to continue with a positive move, that's what I'll use to, last week I had the trade for 417, 200 calls to get about 50 cents, and I didn't buy them because of how the weekly candle looked. But if it holds this swing low point and starts to make a positive move tomorrow, um, probably going to look at getting those 417 200 calls really cheap for that 203.73 target. Going over here now to the daily chart, you know, we had this little dip, which was spot on for us. I thought it would come back up to 189, but it went further, and it actually on the daily made a higher high. Well, if you make a higher high, you got to anticipate a higher low, and this low right here is higher than this one. I thought it was going to come down to about 183.60, 183.70 area. It didn't quite. So what I want to do is, you know, I'm willing to be a little bit late to the party. I want to see if it actually continues upwards to trade to this 196.56 target. In which case, I would look for the 417, 192.50 calls. It would only be a single contract for me, but it would be what I'd look for to trade to that 196.56. If it doesn't come out looking really strong, I'm not going to take puts down to this 183.66 area. But even though I don't have it listed on the spreadsheet, if it made like an M pattern, if we close the day below 182.71, I'm probably going to grab the 417, 175 puts for the M pattern fall that should get us down there if it makes the M pattern. So just be aware of that. I don't see that as a possibility right now, but where would I look for puts? If it gets down below 182.71, we're going to look for the puts play. Probably down into around, you know, right down here, 172.41. So I'd take the 175 puts if that was the trade that it gave me. The 60-minute chart I also have linked. Kind of a weird deal. This wick came down and pierced this. It wasn't quite a W, but most other charts kind of had a W at this time frame. But it was kind of the swing high with a gap. It pierced it, started moving up a little bit. This swing low point here, though, was lower than this little swing low. And had it not been just a little bit, I know it was just a little bit, but had it not been lower, I may have looked at earlier on trading to this 190.18 target. What I'm showing you here is much like in my market overview, I showed you the SPX 60-minute chart, the little ascending triangle that was kind of being made, and it just barely broke that with the close on Friday. Now, my charts, mind you, that last candle of the day is not a 1-hour candle, it's a 30-minute candle, because the one before it closed at 3:30, and this only had a half hour. So with that, you know, if you got continuation upwards, if you're looking for a trade on GS, it's not one I'll be alerting or trading myself per se, but the April 10th 190 calls would be what you could trade up into this area. But I would make this line right here, which is 187.95, my stop. So it'd be very, very tight stop if you wanted to trade that one. So I just figured I'd talk about it here on the video. Again, holiday week ahead. I really never go into a holiday week with a lot of big expectations. Most of the holiday weeks are fairly flat and slow. So, you know, one thing I would say, even for focus group people, we kind of get two of our SPY Day Friday scenarios this week. Don't be afraid to use a small amount. If you're going to do it with the focus group account, do like $100 per leg of the SPY Day Friday trade, and we get to do it Tuesday and Thursday. And I think that sadly would be a better option than necessarily forcing a trade unless it did exactly what we wanted it to do.